All right, listener, get ready, because we are diving deep into the Tudor period in England, and I have a feeling we're in for a wild ride. We've got castles, we've got Shakespeare, we've got enough drama and intrigue to rival a season of, well,
And the best part is we're separating historical fact from fiction.
exactly. You've given us a mountain of notes and summaries, so let's get right into it. Where do we even start with the Tudors?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is just how much change was happening during the Tudor dynasty. It wasn't just about fancy clothes and royal scandals.
Although, let's be honest, there were plenty of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But this was a time when England was really finding its footing on the world stage. The Renaissance was sweeping across Europe, bringing with it new ideas about art, science, religion.
And don't forget the Protestant Reformation.
Right. You've got England breaking away from the Catholic Church, which had huge implications not just for religion, but for politics and society as well.
Talk about a time of upheaval. So how did the monarchs, specifically the Tudors, navigate all this change? They were used to having absolute power, right?
Well, not exactly. You see, the Tudors, especially someone like Henry VIII, they were pretty savvy politicians. They knew they couldn't rule by force alone, especially with so much change happening.
That makes sense. So what did they do?
They got Parliament on their side. Henry VIII, for example, needed Parliament to approve his annulment from Catherine of Aragon. And to get that approval, he had to give them more power.
It's like a political chess game. So by involving Parliament more, did Henry VIII accidentally give them more power than he intended?
Exactly. It's one of the biggest ironies of his reign. He thought he was using Parliament to get what he wanted, but in the process, he actually strengthened their role in English government.
And that paved the way for a more democratic England, right?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. It wasn't like everyone suddenly had a voice. But the House of Commons, which represented the interests of the, shall we say, more moneyed classes.
The wealthy landowners and merchants, right?
Exactly. They started to gain more influence compared to the House of Lords, which was traditionally more powerful.
So while all this political drama is happening, what's life actually like for the everyday person in Tudor England?
It's a mixed bag, really. England's population is booming at this point. That means more people, more demand for food and goods, which can be good for the economy, but...
Uh-oh, there's always a but.
But it also led to inflation. And that's never a good thing for everyday people trying to make ends meet.
Inflation. The one thing that's consistent across centuries. So who's benefiting from this population boom and who's struggling to keep up?
Well, certain groups like the yeoman farmers, they were doing pretty well. They owned their own land and sold their surplus crops at a profit. With more mouths to feed, business was booming.
So not a bad time to be a yeoman farmer.
Not at all. But for others, it was a different story. The rise of enclosures, where landowners fenced off common land for sheep farming.
Wait, for sheep?
Yes. Wool was a huge industry in Tudor England. But this practice, while great for the wool trade, displaced many farmers who relied on that common land to graze their animals and grow their crops.
It's always heartbreaking to see progress for some come at the expense of others. So what happened to those who were displaced? Was there any kind of social safety net?
It wasn't perfect, but England did take a step towards social responsibility with something called the Poor Law of 1601.
The Poor Law, what did that do?
Basically, it made it the responsibility of local communities to care for their poor and disadvantaged. It was a significant step, albeit an early one, towards a more structured system of social welfare.
A step in the right direction. But enough about economics and hardship for now. Let's talk about something a bit more, well, exciting. What were Tudor homes like? Any cool gadgets we might recognize today?
Actually, yes. Believe it or not, one of the biggest changes in Tudor homes was the introduction of the chimney.
A chimney. Okay, now I know it doesn't sound that glamorous, but I'm sensing there's more to this story.
Oh, absolutely. Before chimneys, imagine Tudor houses filled with smoke from cooking fires. It was smoky, smelly, and frankly, pretty unhealthy. Chimneys revolutionized home life, making them cleaner, warmer, and more livable. And here's a fun fact. Despite the population boom, living spaces for most people actually doubled in size during the Tudor period.
Wow, I guess those chimneys really did clear the air. Literally. That's fascinating. Okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about the incredible cultural flourishing that happened during this period. Where do we even start?
Well, we can't talk about Tudor England without talking about the English language itself. This is when we really start to see what we consider standardized English emerge.
The kind of English we find in dictionaries and grammar books.
Precisely. And guess what? The correct way of speaking? the accent that was considered proper, it all stemmed from the dialect used in London.
Of course, London, always setting the trends. But how did this standardized English spread so quickly throughout the country? They didn't have radio or television back then?
True, but they had the next best thing, the printing press. This invention was revolutionary. It allowed books and pamphlets to be mass-produced in standardized English, which meant more people were exposed to it, and it eventually became the norm.
And as more people learned to read, they helped spread the standardized English even further. It really shows how interconnected things are, right?
Absolutely. But it wasn't just about language. The Tudor era saw an explosion in the arts, particularly in theater. And of course, no discussion about Tudor theater would be complete without mentioning the one and only
Shakespeare.
Of course, Shakespeare wasn't the only playwright of the Elizabethan era, but he was certainly the most influential. His plays were groundbreaking, they were thought-provoking, they were full of drama and wit. He truly changed the game for English theater, and his impact is still felt today.
It's incredible. From politics to everyday life to language, literature, and the arts, the Tudors really left their mark on history. It makes you wonder.
Okay.
How much did the changes that began in the Tudor era shape the world we live in today? It's something to think about, isn't it?
It certainly is. And that's the beauty of history. It's not just about dates and names. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our world.
It makes you appreciate how even seemingly small changes can have a ripple effect across centuries. Well said. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners to ponder the enduring legacy of the Tudors. Until next time.